Hello there, Glocal Citizens. Welcome back to the podcast that inspires a borderless mindset around doing something in the world. I'm your host, Florence Adu, and I'm with Dr. Muri Raifu, the CEO and founder of Talamus Health. Last week, we left off where Muri started telling us a little bit more about that business, so let's get right back to the conversation.
The first few years was really about building it, kind of going out in the market, asking questions to make sure that what we're building actually makes sense to people, because you can't be in your cocoon and start to build those kinds of things. And then we have really started kicking in the market, I would say probably in the last 2.5 years or so.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good. So speaking of the market and your work on the continent, this is where I go into my Glocal Speak question. So we want to hear a word, a phrase, or saying that is a meaningful part of your local experience and why or how you came to value it as Glocal Speak. So that could be in the US, that could be in any of the countries you've worked in. Tell us more about your Glocal Speak.
My Glocal Speak is human beings all over the world need to feel empowered.
Okay.
Need to feel empowered about their health, need to feel empowered about their decisions when it comes to their health. They need to feel empowered about where they spend their money and how they spend their money. And they need to feel unshackled by conventional orthodoxies. And so from our point of view, when it comes to health, the relationship of the average person, and this is something that you find everywhere in the world, to healthcare has always been paternalistic.
Yes.
For far too long. And I think there's a sea change that says, I'm the customer. At the end of the day, whether it's through public health organizations or is me paying for a private healthcare, I'm still the ultimate client and I'm still paying, because even if I get through public health, my taxpayer money is still going into me getting that. So I will need to have a say in it. Now, I'm not going to go into the economics of how that works and who deserves what and all of that. It's just not the place for it. But it's a fundamental human need to feel in control a little bit.
Sure.
Especially when it comes to something that's important as healthcare. And this is not something that is restricted to any particular geography. I am yet to go anywhere in the world where people don't have that same sentiment. So that's where we start, right? The fundamental human need that cuts across all cultures, creeds, and religions, or whatever, and then you build from there. That's my Glocal speech.
Okay.
That's it.
No, that's a great one. So human beings need to feel empowered, and I feel like that is ultimately so timely, because we are dealing in a time where we have public people who are disempowering people by just concealing information. And so I think part of that empowerment is really, and that's why your tool is so important in the evolution of healthcare, is because if we don't have enough information about ourselves or about the systems that we're involved in and where our information is flowing and going, we can't be empowered, and we can't take control and responsibility for our own health. So I really like that. That's a great one. So I want to go back to the technical, because I'm really intrigued by the way that you've gone about developing and actually being able to cross borders, because I think that there's a regulatory side of this that you probably have to deal with in addition to just the business side. So tell us more about kind of what that regulatory piece is about. So that empowerment also, because this is a tech platform, and we know that tech in Africa is not equal in every place. So Ghana has great, Wi-Fi access. South Africa, pretty good Wi-Fi access. Nigeria, pretty good, very expensive. So in those regards, tell us about the regulatory and then also the implementation ramp up.
Got it. So from the regulatory side, it's quite interesting because many countries have good laws. One of the things you find in Africa is countries actually have good laws, but half the time people don't even know what the laws are. Exactly. That includes people in the government, right?
Yes.
who are
Yeah.
supposed to even regulate the thing, right? So I've always said Africans are not. It's, people talk about institutions and all of that in Africa. Those issues are not there. I mean, some of the best written laws are actually on the continent. But also some of the horribly written laws are on the continent. So there's always bureaucratic challenges you have to take into consideration. Now, when it comes to healthcare, it's a bit. I'm split because I understand why healthcare needs regulation, right? Because it's such an important thing, right? And if you don't regulate it, you can end up with a disaster, public health disaster, one way or the other, right? But on the other hand, sometimes the regulations can also stifle innovation. And if the regulations are not, some of these regulations that were put in place in the 60s, and it becomes tradition. Meanwhile, technology has advanced, people's behavior towards how they access care has changed, and yet these laws are still, which probably makes perfect sense during the time they were written, have not really been in a very comprehensive, serious way been revisited and addressed. And for some reason, there are often people who actually feel like they need to maintain that. And so I think that's always an issue. And so you have to deal with that in each country, right? So our approach is, as we're building the tech, we started testing the water in different countries at the same time. So we were talking to people in South Africa, we were talking to people in Ghana and Nigeria, all to selling it to people in all those countries, all in the effort to actually get enough feedback about, oh, no, here you can't do that. Oh, in Nigeria, you absolutely cannot do that. Like in South Africa for a long time, it's funny people are talking about telemedicine now. Back in when we had our first prototype in late 2016, early 2017, we already had a telemedicine component on our platform already. And we went to South Africa, and in South Africa, the law was that you could not do telemedicine, at least not for initial consultation. And even for follow-up consultation, there was a lot of resistance to it, institutional. So we had to actually make a series of changes to how our video flow was to ensure that all these things were taken care of, from both to protect both our users, but also to protect the company. But those kind of laws were not clearly defined in Ghana yet. And then a year later, there was an organization now established in Ghana where you have to go sit and do the whole demo. Again, nothing wrong with that establishment, the way they have it established. But my point is, it was a whole different process than we account in South Africa. So now we had to go and figure out, okay, how does our system fit into this new set of regulations in Ghana?
Sure.
And these things are also evolving because technology is just going so fast. And often, quietly, people are individually using these technologies, but there's no way for people to know that they're using the technology. But if you're a company that is in the public sphere, you need to make sure that you adhere to the rules. So, and the rules are not necessarily keeping up with the changing landscape of technology.
Right.
So it's a balance that we're always kind of striking. How do we push the envelope to give people better access to care without running afoul of existing laws? And then, of course, in the process, also try to be part of the solution. How do we now talk to the regulators to kind of help them to help with the process? I mean, the regulators are looking at these things. It's just slow, as it is mostly with government. Things tend to be slow. They have to go through several level layers, and most of the people have a million things to do. So, something that if it was a small group of people could have come up with in 6 months, may take 2 years. And most businesses don't really have 2 years to implement an innovation. So the question is, how do we then get ourselves involved so that we are at the table when these changes are being made in a way that strikes a good balance between safety, which I think is very important, and innovation, trying to leverage existing technology and emerging technology to help people gain access to healthcare.
So what kind of resource, so do you have like an intergovernmental staff person, like someone who's dedicated to that on an ongoing basis, or a policy person that's just their role in the company?
We don't have any set person. I play that role because I do have my master's in that stuff. But we also have people who have, we do have a government liaison who has relationships in different governments to allow us to do that. As we grow as a company, we're probably going to have to dedicate a team to that.
Or a lobbyist. Yeah. So the thing that
Yeah.
came to mind is like, oh, that's a lobbyist. Like
Yeah.
you're gonna have to, that's just how it's gonna work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, very interesting. And so thinking about the actual having to adapt that technology and everything, where are your tech people? Are they in the US? Are they around the world? How
We have a
where
very distributed team.
okay.
We have teams on the continent, we have teams in Europe, we have team here in the United States. And we did that from the beginning. So we have a distributed team that does coordinate very well. And we have, we have our meetings every Wednesdays where we kind of go through everything. So I dedicate my Wednesdays to Talamus regardless. So I don't do clinic, I don't operate.
Yeah.
And I really, well, I mean, if there's an emergency, obviously. But
Sure.
I really, those days are the days I deal with a lot of those things as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So what are you seeing as some of the trends? As you mentioned, now we're in this telemedicine phase. What are some of the trends that are starting to surface, and what do you see as, the next hurdle, the next big challenge in the space and for telemedicine?
Well, I think telemedicine is going to be important part of healthcare,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think it's going to be the panacea as a lot of people seem to think.
Sure.
Even there's very early evidence already in this country, in the United States, that while people really enjoyed their healthcare experience during the pandemic doing telemedicine, a lot of them is skyrocketed, and now there's been a bit of a pullback.
Yeah.
Where patients still like at least some degree of physical encounter with their doctor.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's going to be a combo. For example, for the first time, most patients who want to come for surgical evaluation tend to prefer to see the doctor in person before that. And so this is shifting still. We are very, we saw that surge because people had no choice. But now that things are reopening, I think in the next 6 months, we're going to see the dust is going to settle, and we're going to see how much telemedicine has gained.
Yeah.
Telemedicine has always been something. Like I said, we had our telemedicine from the beginning because I always thought telemedicine is a very important aspect of healthcare, mostly because it just drives up compliance. Patients, people get paid, but patients have to go through to seek help sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
What you see as a doctor is when they get to your office. But what you don't see is when they leave your office or before they get to your office, what actually they had to go through.
Yeah.
Right? And whatever instruction you give them, what else do they have to go through to actually be compliant with it? And people forget that, say, a woman who's in the market who lives on what she makes on that day cannot afford 3-4 days of back and forth to a doctor's clinic.
Right.
Because she has to eat. The family has to eat. So telemedicine can play a role in that.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think at some point we're going to figure out there's an equilibrium, a new equilibrium is going to set.
Yeah.
And then it's probably going to stay there for a while until there's shift and it doesn't have to be another pandemic per se. Or it could be a shift like the many young Africans we have who now are digital natives coming into the workforce where now they are the consumers and they have disposable income.
Right.
That I think is going to also create another shift in telemedicine as well, because they have a different way of perceiving and consuming or expectation of how they can consume any kind of service, and healthcare being one of them. So I think things are going to change. Are going to be, instead of, are going to be kind of one of those, as opposed to this, it's going to be more like boom. Then it's going to slowly go up and then boom. And they're going to be those kind of things. And on the continent, I see the youth bulge being the next thing that really puts things like television onto the next level as well.
Sure. Interestingly, I just was watching a program on the NewsHour, and compliance was the number one benefit for this doctor. He was saying, like, the best thing about telemedicine is compliance. Like, I can truly monitor and make sure that my patients are, complying. And this had to do with substance abuse. And so I think that what's probably going to shake out is like there will be specific areas of medicine or treatment that are going to fall into this as a telemedicine practice, and those that fall into something else.
Yeah, and it's more so. I mean, if you look at the VA hospital, the VA has really done a good job with all these problems. Has done a good job when it comes to the telemedicine arena, and they were doing that before the pandemic.
Right.
And one of the big areas was telehealth for veterans. And it's all a major, I think up to 39% decrease in hospital days for veterans, or is it 59? It was a crazy number like that. In hospital, those who utilized telehealth.
Telemedicine.
Yeah, so it's telemental health, when they evaluated that and all that. So you had a lot less people are showing up at the hospital and emergency room with crisis and all of that. So you're right. There are areas that are probably going to be ahead of the curve when it comes to telemedicine, and the other side is going to have to follow. I think surgical specialties are going to be one of the ones that kind of lag behind,
right?
Just by the nature of what we do. So.
Exactly. Interesting. So now I'm moving to my mindset hack question. So this is where I ask you what your favorite or an innovative mindset hack is. So this is one that you can imagine, or one that you know of, or one that you practice.
Mindset hack.
Yes, you're a techie.
Just do it.
Okay.
I prefer the Nike one,
Yes.
Just do it. I was an athlete in college and
what's
soccer.
Soccer. Football. Okay.
Heresy, football. Soccer, football, whatever. And I was actually a center forward for my college.
Okay.
So my hack about things is, why not me? Why not you? Why not us? Get out and do it. Find out the solution, find the problem and find a solution to it. Ask the right questions, go after it. And if they say you can't do it, say, well, not yet. Right. But we'll figure it out. And that's how innovation happens. Is people just saying, just tinkling with something. I spent time doing experiments and, like I said, for my thesis, I was designing PCR primers that were blind PCR primers where you can actually throw them into any set of genes and get them to start sequencing. And I had to come up with the whole thing. I mean, I didn't really know much about genetics until 2 years before I started that, and I figured it out. By the time I was done, I figured it out. And so it's about, and it took a lot of failure in the process.
Right.
A lot of the experiments I didn't work.
Yeah. So just listeners, that was a very technical term, the PCR primer. So I will in the show notes something about exactly what that is. So you get a better sense of that's kind of a baseline in genetics work, correct?
Yeah. We kind of failed. I mean, I did many experiments in the lab. I spent my summer in college, just failed. Then figured it out and wrote my final thesis on it. And it's being used around the world right now. Many labs actually will request you. So my college still makes those primers and sends them out to different labs around the world. Yeah.
Nice.
So, but to get to that, there was a lot of failure.
Yeah.
So the aim is not to worry about those failures. The aim is you're going to figure out there's a problem that needs to be solved. I'm going to solve it. I expect to fail. Have some failures along the way, but eventually I'm going to get there.
Got it. So I want to take a little bit of a side turn into a little bit more about Muri the man. So I like to ask my guests about something that that they're into, maybe aside from the work or aside from what their craft is. So tell us, you strike me as someone who reads a bit. Would I be right if I said that, or are you more?
I do read. I mean, I like politics. I'm a politics junkie.
Okay.
So I read a lot about things. I like art a lot. I mean, people forget. I mean, when I was in New York, actually, most of my friends were artists.
Yes, that's true. So for we're doing this with a video, folks, and so I'm looking at the wall behind Muri, and it has a combination of photographs, and I want to say there's also some drawings, all black and white.
Actually all photographs, and actually all the photographs were taken by my wife.
Okay.
And I'm gonna tell you a little bit. So you see that girl right there with the mask over her face. This photograph was taken in 2016, I think, or 2015.
That's the one in the corner.
Right here. This is prior to the pandemic. So this was taken in where I grew up, Alabama. So we had gone to Ghana to visit, and I couldn't find where she was. So she had gone out with one of my nieces. just to explore the neighborhood on her
Yeah.
own.
Yeah.
And so all these kids came around her and she started taking pictures
Yeah.
of those kids. And this is very fierce. I mean, it's quite striking picture in person. This was, you see right here, this is the alley I used to run through as a
Oh,
kid.
really?
Because I
Oh,
grew
really?
up in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
This is the alley I used to run. And the strange thing is we came back with a picture of a kid running through the same alley.
Wow. That's
Insane,
awesome.
right? And this, again, is an area I used to play.
Okay.
And this is in front of the house I grew up in with all these kids that are there. And it felt like I could be any of these kids, you know.
Yeah.
So, and then these girls were also girls from the neighborhood. Actually, one of them is the daughter of one of my good friends when I was growing up. Again, I didn't, I wasn't there. I don't know if you can see, there's another one. So these two were taken in Eritrea.
Okay, the one with the baby on the back.
Yeah. So this was taken where her mom grew up.
Okay.
And this was taken where her dad grew up. And then this was, I don't know if the reflection allows you to really see it, but it's the slave castle.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can see it.
And
Yeah.
this is facing the auction block. And the funny thing is, when we're there, we did not see any young kids. But if you could see the picture, there's a young kid running by himself. Well, I don't know if he's he or she, by him or herself, towards the auction block with nobody in sight.
Yeah.
Which is a very strange thing because honestly, I do not remember seeing the kid. And I don't remember any adults on that tall carrying it as young as that.
Sure.
So a very eerie picture in a lot of ways. But this is all her photography. I can't claim credit for it.
Okay, but it's beautiful. It looks very artistic.
She's good.
Yeah. Yeah. So then tell us, what are you reading now? What do you read? What are some of the great reads you've come across in your life? I mean, that you mentioned.
I haven't done much reading recently, although I have a list of books I really want to read.
Okay. What about some of the art?
I've done a lot of magazines, The Economist, I do a lot of reading online. I do a lot of random readings. I can't predict anything. Anything that catches my fancy, that comes across, I probably means that thing owns the next 5-10 minutes of my life.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm the rabbit hole kind of guy. Like I see something, I'm like, oh, then that's it. I'm reading it end to end.
Yeah.
Right. I pull information and I move on. So, and that kind of unintentional reading, I think is just as important as the intentional readings.
Oh, I agree.
Because for me, what happens is that it allows me to do horizontal integration of information. Right. And allows me to connect the dots. Without even realizing I'm doing it. Because the piece of information from here, piece of information from there, piece of information. And then in the back of my mind, it's kind of saying, okay, I know this, I know that, I know that, I know that. I read about this, I read about that. Well, I know there's got to be some kind of connection there. How do I actually, now that the question is being posed to me, how do I now use what I have? What else do I need to finish that circle to try and answer this question?
Right.
So, and the subject matters may be completely unrelated to each other.
Right. Of course.
It could be science, art, connect all of that. You're talking about religion and talk about colonization on one hand and talk about neuroscience. You talk about stress, you talk about cortisol, you talk about how does those kind of historical things, the current state of affect people's health. Like, how you can draw the line in a very intellectually rigorous way is by having at least some working knowledge of those different kinds of things. So I value intentional reading as much as unintentional reading because I think actually those two are very important in understanding the depth of things. So it allows you to ask many questions. When something is posed to you, you're like, okay, there's got to be several layers to this, and these are the different angles you can look at it from. Right?
Yes,
and that allows you to actually come up with a much more layered and nuanced answer to questions. I think.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I like that, the horizontal integration piece. I like that concept because I think we do it a lot. particularly because of the way that we consume content these days, because you're on many platforms, you're hearing your radio, you're, listening some, watching some. So what about what you're seeing? So you mentioned that art is, you're very into art. So tell us some of the artists that you might be attuned to or follow.
Okay, so there's a whole bunch of artists that I follow. There's some new, some old.
Okay.
And there's different artists, actually. Musicians, obviously, people in fine art, Wangechi. I follow Wangechi Mutu
Oh, yes.
very
Yes.
closely, who's a personal friend. There are some emerging Ghanaian artists that I think are great, like, Amoako Boafo. I think he does amazing, amazing work. His work blows me away. Can't wait to get my hands on one of those.
Yeah.
Shoni Barre.
Yes, of course.
An amazing artist. Am I blanking on this name? It's in New York. Starts with a B. Biggest. Yeah.
Yeah, Stanford.
Stanford. Biggest does amazing, amazing work. So yeah, I mean, just to mention a few quick off my head right now.
Okay.
There are quite a few others, and there's some that are like do other things like sculpture. There's a guy called Dotun who uses a lot of scrap metal to make amazing artwork. Nigerian artist.
Okay.
And then I love all the young hyper realists who are coming up, especially out of Nigeria.
Yes.
I think are just on a whole different level. So I follow those too. Some of them. Mostly on social media.
Yeah.
And then there's artists, obviously, the classic fella. I'm a fella guy. Bob Marley, the whole nine. And I like some of our new artists from both Ghana, Nigeria, and other places. Right. Shatta movement. I think what's his name is a remarkable lyricist. I think if he were in any other context, he'd be ridiculous.
Shatta or
Shatta, I like music. Sarkodie.
Sarkodie, yeah.
So Sarkodie is very lyrically. If you speak Twi,
yes,
and you understand him lyrically, you really will appreciate how layered and creative he is in what in his lyrics. So I follow him as well. And obviously the Nigerian artists, they've taken over at the moment. So I listen to all of them. Yeah, so a combination of old and new. I like the traditional stuff.
Yes.
I still listen to Sonny Ade, the whole, the old time. I'm still old. So I'm split between the new time and the old time. I like the old time stuff.
Yeah, which is important because you can appreciate both and you stay current. Yeah.
Nice. And now you got, the Versus is bringing some good hip hop. I mean, I listen to dancehall reggae. I forgot to mention that. I'm a big dancehall reggae fan. I mean, you can't go to college in the US as an African and not become a dancehall reggae fan.
Yeah, that's true.
So, I don't know so much the new artists in dancehall reggae, but, some of the old ones are still pretty big for me.
Right.
And obviously hip hop and all of that. So I listen to hip hop and, Talib Kweli, Mos Def.
Mm-hmm. Our
the whole thing. Yeah, not so much the newer guys so much. Some of the new guys, yeah. But not as much.
Okay. So your eyes and your ears are very alert.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Nice. Well, Muri, I've really enjoyed our conversation. It's been so wonderful.
Same here. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Thank you. So do you have any last words for our listeners?
Well, I mean, we are living in challenging times. I think more important than now is people have to start understanding the interconnectivity of our actions. And I think for a long time, we had drifted away from that. People always talk about the butterfly effect, and it always seems like an abstract concept.
Mm-hmm.
What decisions you make now in everything you do in your life is not just about you. It's about how it affects everybody else. And I'm not talking about, everybody needs to go and hug a tree or that everybody needs to be out there volunteering for it. But it's okay if you want to live a life where you go to work and come back and live. You don't want to do extra stuff because that's not what you want to. That's perfectly fine. Don't feel guilty about that. Don't allow yourself to be guilted about that.
Yeah.
My only request though is that when you're at work, understand that your actions at work matter to that person. What if you're creating a product for somebody, it matters to that person's life. If you're working with somebody to create that product, your behavior matters to that person's life. And being aware of what your actions means for others is important,
Right.
and that we keep it that simple for me. And that's will be what I leave for people.
Nice. I like it. That's a great place to leave it. So, Glocal Citizens, thank you again for joining us for another episode of the podcast. As always, you can reach us at www.glocalcitizenspod.com. You can catch us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, pretty much everywhere that you find podcasts, you can find this podcast, which is live every Tuesday. And please comment, subscribe, check out the show notes always. Those are on pretty much all the platforms, but definitely at the website, because these are also very rich show notes this week. So until next time, bye for now.